In the conference hall, it was noisy. Business discussions overlapped, and loud toasts to successful deals rang out everywhere. The air was filled with the scent of expensive champagne, light perfume, and refreshingly fresh coffee. I smiled at my colleagues, but at that moment my phone screen lit up, casting a bluish glow on the pristine, white tablecloth. Tyler. It was surprising that he called, as he rarely did so without a reason. My heart skipped a beat before I casually picked up the phone and stepped into the hallway, expecting to hear something mundane. "How's your trip?" Or, "When will you be back?" But what I heard knocked the ground out from under me. "I'm divorcing you." His voice sounded nonchalant, almost triumphant. "I've already sold the apartment, so you need to decide where you're going to live. Have a nice time." I froze. Inside, something snapped, but outwardly, I remained motionless. Divorce? Selling the apartment? "You sold the apartment?" I asked calmly, trying not to reveal the storm raging inside me. "Yes," he replied with a dry chuckle. "Nicole and I need the money to start a new life. She deserves more than this little box." Nicole. A name I didn't want to hear but had long suspected. Everything suddenly made sense. The late business trips, the detachment, the endless excuses. Now he wasn't even trying to hide it. He wasn't just leaving. He was celebrating it. The hum of voices in the conference hall behind me sounded muffled, as if through water. I looked at my reflection in the glass wall, a perfectly matched outfit, a confident posture. I wouldn't let him see me fall apart. "Sounds good," I replied, keeping my cool. "You won't hear a single tear from me." When I returned to the hall, no one noticed any change. I smiled, raised my glass, nodded at the right moments, but inside I was seething with anger. Tyler thought he could just erase me from his life, leave me homeless, discard me like old furniture. He didn't know one important thing. The apartment was already in my name. He was so used to thinking of me as foolish and submissive that he didn't even bother to check the documents after refinancing the mortgage. He signed the papers without reading because he was sure I would never do to him what he did to me. He was wrong. I sat in the hotel room, unfastening the bracelet on my wrist, when anger gave way to determination. I didn't need revenge. I just had to let him destroy himself. I dialed the number of my best friend and lawyer, Chloe, calmly without panic. "He sold the apartment," I said, "or at least he thinks he did." "He what?" Chloe's voice rose. "Is that even legal?" "Number, because he's not the owner." In the ensuing silence, I heard her smirk. "So, he doesn't know yet?" Her voice rang with anticipation. "No." I allowed a smile to touch my lips. He would find out. Very soon. And then he would realize that he had lost a game he didn't even know he was playing. That night, Amelia couldn't fall asleep for a long time. She lay on the wide bed in her hotel room, staring at the ceiling, in which the flickering city lights were reflected. Everything that had happened was playing back in her mind like a slow-motion replay. Every word Tyler said, his contemptuous tone, his confidence that he could erase her from his life without giving her a chance to resist. He had always thought he was smarter. He had always thought he could manipulate her because she never gave him a reason to think otherwise. How many times had she turned a blind eye to his sharp comments, to his mocking glances when she talked about her career ambitions, to his confidence that everything in their life depended on him and her contribution was insignificant? Now it seemed so obvious. He had built a cage for her, but he hadn't considered that she always held the key in her hands. The apartment, their cozy, lovingly furnished home, which she thought was a symbol of their future together. But Tyler had made a fatal mistake. He never read the documents carefully. When they refinanced the mortgage a few months ago, she had to take on most of the paperwork. He just signed without looking, as he always did. She didn't pay much attention to it then, but now this little fact changed everything. The apartment belonged only to her, and he didn't even suspect it. Amelia sat up in bed, suddenly feeling a surge of energy. Tyler thought he had it all figured out, but he didn't even realize that his biggest weapon had already turned against him. She smiled, picked up the phone, and dialed the number. "Are you awake?" Chloe's voice was a little sleepy, but there was no irritation in it, They had been friends for too long for Amelia to worry about such things. I'm sorry it's so late, but this is important. Amelia took a deep breath. Tyler thinks he sold our apartment. There was silence on the other end of the line, then a short laugh. You're kidding, right? Chloe asked. Wait, but it's in your name, isn't it? Yes. And he doesn't know? Chloe's voice was a mix of surprise and admiration. He doesn't know. Wow. Amelia heard her friend jump out of bed. Now they were both in attack mode. Okay, listen, Chloe said, now fully awake. If he signed a contract with the buyer, that's already fraud. He can't sell what he doesn't own. At best, the deal will be annulled. At worst, he'll face legal consequences. Amelia clutched the phone tightly. She wasn't going to feel sorry for him. What should I do? She asked. First, we need to urgently notify the buyer that the deal is invalid. This should happen before Tyler gets the money. And if he already has, then it's even worse for him. He could be charged with fraud if he doesn't return the funds. And that's just the beginning. Amelia listened, and something inside her changed. If before she felt pain, humiliation, now there was a clear, cold understanding of her own strength. Tyler had always relied on her submissiveness. He expected her to cry, to beg him to come back. He hoped to see her weak, but instead he would see a woman who had stepped out of his shadow and whom he could no longer control. She straightened up, her voice firm. Chloe, we'll do everything by the book. I want him to realize every mistake he's made. This is going to be beautiful, her friend replied. Just imagine his face when he finds out that all this time he's been playing someone else's game. Amelia allowed herself to smile. I'm not a victim anymore, Chloe. It's time to show him that. The next morning, Amelia's phone was buzzing with messages. One after another, notifications came in. Calls from unknown numbers, new emails. She had a feeling she knew who it was. The buyer of the apartment, the person who had put down a deposit, expecting to receive property that Tyler had sold him illegally. Soon the phone rang. Amelia calmly pressed answer. Miss Walker? A man's voice was restrained but clearly tense. My name is David Hudson. Your, spouse and I made a deal to buy the apartment, and now it turns out that it legally belongs to you. I'd like to know what's going on here. Amelia listened to him without emotion, then calmly replied, Mr. Hudson, I understand your concern. Tyler had no right to sell the apartment as he is not the owner. The deal is legally null and void. He took my deposit. The man's voice was angry. This is fraud. I agree, Amelia replied coldly, and I intend to report this to the appropriate authorities. If the money is not returned to you immediately, I believe you have every right to sue him. A short pause, then David chuckled. I've already hired a lawyer. If he doesn't give me my money back within a day, I'm filing a lawsuit. Thanks for the information, Miss Walker. He hung up. Amelia leaned back in her chair, holding the phone in her hand. The first stone had been cast. Meanwhile, Tyler knew nothing. He obviously thought his plan had succeeded and continued to act as if everything was under control. Later that day, he sent her a message. I'm picking up my things today. I hope you won't make a scene. She smirked. He didn't even suspect that his scheme was already falling apart. A few hours later, the phone rang. Are you home now? His voice was calm, as if he was talking to some random acquaintance, not the woman he had betrayed. No, Amelia replied calmly. You can pick up your things when I'm not there. Fine. He paused for a moment, then added, by the way, if you need help moving, let me know. I think you won't last long in that apartment alone. How self-assured he sounded. How confident he was that he still controlled the situation. Amelia decided not to shatter his illusions right away. Let him continue to think that everything was going according to his plan. Let him feel confident until reality caught up with him. She left him in that sweet delusion for a day. A few more messages, a few more phone calls where he acted as if he had won the war. I'm meeting with a real estate agent tomorrow to discuss new options. If you're smart, you'll think about where to live next, he said with a hint of condescension. Amelia just smiled. His victory was on the verge of collapse. She allowed him to make plans. She didn't object when he said he had already chosen a new apartment with Nicole, when he mocked her situation, when he acted as if he controlled her life. She let him think he was winning, and then the day came when it all fell apart. "Tyler, there's something you need to know," she said when he called her again. "What is it?" He sounded relaxed. "You didn't sell the apartment." Silence. "What are you talking about?" he finally snapped. "You can't sell what you don't own, Tyler. The apartment is in my name. The contract is invalid." "What?" His voice turned into a scream. Amelia smiled, looking out the window. "And the buyer is going to sue you for fraud. He's already hired a lawyer." A heavy silence on the other end of the line. You're lying." He tried to cling to the last remnants of control, but he had already lost. "You can check the documents yourself, though of course you never read them." "That was your biggest mistake, Tyler." She heard his heavy breathing, then the sound of something smashing against the wall. "You set me up!" he screamed. "No!" Her voice was cold, icy. "You set yourself up. I just let you believe you were in control." She ended the call and put the phone down on the table. The game was over. Chapter 4. Confrontation. Tyler comes home in a rage. Amelia was sitting in the living room, engrossed in work, when she heard the front door slam. Tyler. His heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway before he burst into the room. His face was flushed, his lips pressed into a thin line, and his eyes were filled with rage and confusion. "What the hell?" he gasped, waving his phone in front of him. "Why is my deal canceled?" Amelia looked at him, barely suppressing a smile. He looked enraged but also scared, as if realizing that the ground was slipping out from under him. "You can't sell what you don't own, Tyler." Confrontation scene. "You're lying," he growled, clenching his fists. "The apartment is ours. We bought it together." Amelia sighed and, without rushing, reached for the folder lying on the table. She opened it and took out the official documents that clearly stated the sole owner of the apartment is Amelia Walker. "You signed these papers yourself, Tyler." Her voice was calm, like ice water. "During the refinancing, remember? You didn't even bother to read them." His expression changed. Anger gave way to disbelieving shock. "No, this can't be," he whispered, snatching the papers from her hands. His eyes darted across the lines as he tried to grasp the destructiveness of his mistake. "Oh, it's more than possible," Amelia continued. "You gave me all the legal power yourself. You just didn't notice. And now you've officially tried to sell someone else's property." He abruptly dropped the papers on the table and glared at her. "You planned all this," he spat out. "You deliberately waited to strike at the most vulnerable moment." Amelia slightly tilted her head, her lips curving into a barely noticeable smirk. "You dug your own grave, Tyler. I just let you fall into it." Collapse of confidence. He clenched his jaw, his hands trembling. For the first time in his life, he felt helpless. I can sue," he desperately blurted out. "I'll hire a lawyer and prove that you tricked me." Amelia leaned forward, her gaze piercing him like a knife. "You can try, Tyler, but here's the problem." She paused to let him feel the moment. "The deal with the buyer is canceled. He's already preparing a lawsuit against you for fraud. You took money for an apartment that doesn't belong to you. That's a criminal offense." His skin paled. He knew she wasn't bluffing. "You can't do this to me." His voice trembled, his confidence dissolving into fear. "Oh, I already have." Final blow. Amelia stood up from her seat and approached him, towering over him. "You lost, Tyler." He was silent, his chest heaving. "If you try to outsmart me again, if you continue to threaten me, or try to take anything that belongs to me, I will hand all the documents over to the prosecutor, and you will go to jail." She paused, then leaned closer, and softly, almost in a whisper, added, "And this time, I won't stop until you're behind bars." Tyler swallowed. His self-assurance had vanished, leaving only a pitiful, broken expression on his face. He knew his game was over. Without saying another word, he turned sharply and left, slamming the door behind him. Amelia took a deep breath. She had won. The next morning, Amelia woke up with a sense of freedom. It wasn't complete yet, but she could already feel it in the lightness of her movements, in the calmness with which she looked at her reflection in the mirror. It was time to put the final period. She opened her laptop and began typing a letter to her lawyer. The divorce papers were ready. All that was left was to sign them. Chloe had already prepared everything. Legal documents, property distribution, although there was nothing to divide since the apartment remained with her. Tyler was leaving with nothing. She sent the letter and felt a warm satisfaction spread inside her. This wasn't revenge, it was liberation. A few days later, an unexpected call came. Nicole. Amelia smirked when she saw the name on the screen. Not long ago, that name had caused her pain, but now she felt only indifference. Did you know about this? Nicole's voice was sharp, nervous. Did you know he was trying to sell an apartment that didn't belong to him? Oh, you're in the loop now. Amelia nonchalantly took a sip of coffee. Aha, and what are you going to do now? He lied to me, Nicole exploded. He said the apartment was his. He said we were going to start a new life, that he had money, and now this damn lawyer says he can be sued. Amelia smiled. There it was. Another of Tyler's illusions was crumbling. Looks like he was lying to more than just me, she replied calmly. Maybe now you'll understand who you're dealing with. There was silence on the other end of the line, then a heavy sigh. I'm not going to deal with this shit, Nicole muttered. I'm leaving. Good luck, Amelia said and hung up. This time, Tyler was on his own. Weeks passed. Amelia didn't keep track of Tyler, but news reached her on its own. He was in a terrible situation. The buyer had sued him, demanding the return of the deposit and compensation for fraud. The money he had planned to spend on a new life with Nicole was gone. He had to leave his job. His reputation was ruined. He tried to get into debt to seek support from friends, but no one wanted to have anything to do with him. Nicole left him, not wanting to deal with his problems. He was left with nothing. One day, Amelia received a message. Can we talk? Tyler wrote briefly. She didn't respond. The next day, another message. Amelia, I made a mistake. We need to talk about everything. She smiled. Now he was begging, but it was already too late. A few days later, he called. She didn't pick up, but he didn't give up. I screwed up, Amelia. You know I didn't mean to hurt you. Let's meet, just talk. Maybe we can fix everything. She deleted the message without a second thought. Tyler had lost everything. And Amelia finally found her freedom. A morning came that felt different, clean, light, free. Amelia stood by the window of her apartment, looking out at the city that had always seemed too noisy, too chaotic to her. But today, in that chaos, she saw opportunities. She no longer lived in the shadow of the past. Tyler had disappeared from her life completely. The divorce papers were signed, sent, and notarized. He no longer wrote, called, or tried to return what he had lost. She had let him go. She gathered all the things that reminded her of him and without regret, threw them away. There was no more pain, anger, or regret, only a new path that she was going to walk with her head held high. Immersing herself in work, Amelia felt a change in her perception. She no longer doubted herself. Meetings with clients ended with her victories, negotiations ended in her favor, and projects she took on became successful. Colleagues noticed the changes. She was no longer the woman who could be manipulated. Now she was respected not only for her professionalism, but also for her strength of character. Soon she was offered a promotion. Now she didn't just work for the company, she ran it. The irony was that once Tyler had laughed at her ambitions, and now she had achieved what he could not. Her career was thriving, but most importantly, she was thriving. Amelia stood on the terrace of a tall building, breathing in the cool night air. Below, the city bustled with people who rushed, lived, loved, made mistakes, and started over. She smiled. She had won. But her victory was not revenge. The real victory was that she had found herself. She no longer lived in fear, no longer feared loneliness, no longer depended on others' decisions. She trusted herself. Intuition is a powerful weapon, and the best revenge is success, she thought, finishing her glass of champagne. This was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning.